like to welcome everyone to Baha'i Chat, a conversation series dedicated to our interconnectedness and to focusing on the many social challenges in our community and our society. In this space, we have the pleasure of highlighting those individuals or organizations who are taking action and making a difference in the world and hopefully inspiring us to do the same. Before I get into the program, I just want to give a little background on the Baha'i Faith. The Baha'i Faith is a world religion based on the fundamental belief in the unity and oneness of mankind. Baha'is believe that as we work towards unity, we must address the many inequalities in our society, because at the heart of inequity is injustice, and we cannot hope to achieve this unity we desire unless we are working towards justice. Baha'is believe that racism is the most vital and challenging issue in the world today. And this space, Baha'i Chat, is dedicated primarily to promoting racial justice, healing, and unity. Baha'is believe that throughout history, God has sent humanity a series of divine educators known as manifestations of God, whose unifying teachings have provided the very basis for the advancement of civilization. These manifestations have included Abraham, Krishna, Zoroaster, Moses, Buddha, and Muhammad. Baha'u'llah, which means the glory of God, the latest of these messengers, as Baha'is believe, explain that the religions of the world come from the same source and are in essence successive chapters in one religion from God. Baha'is believe that the crucial need facing humanity is a unifying vision of the future of society, and that the nature and purpose of life is to acquire virtues, honesty, trustworthiness, love for one another, and to work for the betterment of the world and the betterment of our society. Which brings us to our guest today, Mr. Sam Kirk. I have known Sam, or Mr. Kirk, as his students refer to him, or Pastor Kirk, as he's also known, for over 30 years. Now, I don't want to put words for him, but I can only think that he saw a problem, recognized an inequity, and through prayer and planning decided to take action for the betterment of his community and society at large. Again, this isn't about Sam, and I know he wouldn't want me to say too much, but in taking action, his organization has affected the lives of so many young people, has had a transgenerational effect, in other words, affecting children and youth, which affects their youth and so on. So I hope I have your attention because we have a very exciting program today. And without, let me just give a little bit of background and bio on Sam without giving too much information. Sam is the founder and president of Creating an Environment of Success, a federally registered 501c3. And he's the executive director of Youth About Business, a youth leadership development organization that specializes in preparing diverse talent for corporate America. Through its summer camp and school year program, Youth About Business has reached over 9,000 young people, helping them to develop professional skills that they can use in their chosen career path. The Youth About Business school year program offers students the hands-on experience of running a business, while the summer business camp brings students to universities across the country to learn from and network with top-level executives at international companies such as Bloomberg, Ernst & Young, Deloitte, Epic Brokers, Apple, and Sony. Both learning experiences help young people understand the complex operations of business and finance, while developing the critical thinking and analytical skills they can use in their personal and professional lives. So without further ado, please welcome my good friend and CEO of Youth About Business, Sam Kirk.
Mr. Rayner, thank you so much for that introduction, and thanks for having us today. Boy, it has been a long time. We've known each other for a very long time. Thanks for inviting our group to speak today.
You're welcome. I didn't want to date myself, so I didn't say how long. I just said long.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I still have a little hair, you don't have any. So we both had lots of it when we first met. But listen, and thanks to those that are joining us online today. You know, it's always a pleasure to, when people begin to talk to me about leveling the playing field. I left corporate America 29 years ago, and many of my colleagues and peers asked, why are you leaving? And I said, you know, I'm tired of us losing our children, tired of us not having the kind of opportunities where all young people and all people can participate in the American dream. And we left there to begin a program called Youth About Business. And we've assembled, you know, quite a few people today to help us share what that program's impact is. But it was always interesting to me that I used to hear the labels people gave to young people. They would call them at risk or disadvantaged. And I never used those labels. I always refer to them as underserved, because I think if you give young people the right kinds of opportunities and trainings, they will compete in America. They'll be able to achieve just like any other group. So we set out focused to truly create an environment of success, which is what CES stands for. We want to create an environment of success and allow all young people to participate in the American dream. So you can ask me whatever questions you like, and then I'll also introduce part of our panel as well.
Well, I was gonna, you know, start out maybe as the panel comes in, but you know, you said the program started in 1992, I believe. So it's 29
years ago, 1992.
And I didn't want to, like I said before, I don't want to put words in your statement, but what made you decide to start Youth About Business? If I can just ask that question.
Yeah, I was, again, first of all, I was tired of us losing young people. And I think that many times the reason we lose young people is that the choices that they're afforded, they're not broad choices, you know. So obviously, you know, we know a lot of young people from underserved communities. They want to be entertainers and athletes. We understand, and the likelihood of them making it in those two areas very slim. So oftentimes they end up having negative choices, you know, and maybe gangs, drugs, crime, other things. And I wanted to create a way for them to have the right type of skill sets to compete in America. So we started teaching them entrepreneurship, how to run a small business. When we first started, there were 7 young people, and we asked the local business community, would you help just mentor these young people, show them that they can run a successful small business. They don't have to be an entertainer or an athlete. And so that's how the whole program started. And then it grew, and we actually ended up having young people run small training centers where we were able to start a bakery, and they would run that small bakery. And it was another image of success for them to see, if I work hard, if I, you know, just sort of learn the skill set, I can become very successful. And ultimately, 7 years into the program, we took a group of them to New York to show them Wall Street. We wanted to introduce them to the world of corporate finance and equity. And they said to me that was one of the most fascinating things we ever did. But I assure you, many of them had never been exposed to that particular type of opportunity. So we really wanted to focus on at least demystifying the world for them so they could see all the various opportunities that were available to them, even though they lived in what I consider underserved communities.
Gotcha. That's well, I know that I've been able to witness the transformation and the impact of students along the way. And some of them are here today to talk about their experience. With all the talk today about financial literacy, you know, which we really saw that come to light more during the financial crisis, which Youth About was very much involved in and very active during that time frame. How would you say it helps address the issues of financial literacy? Because I know that deals with personal finance. I'll just give you an example. I have a friend of mine who recently I spoke with, and he said when he got out of college, he knew a whole lot about debt, but he never heard of equity.
Right.
You know, those college students, they get all these credit cards and so forth. And I just wanted to know if you could speak to that, or maybe some of the students could when they come on later, about how that has impacted them as well.
Yeah. And again, I think again, the key is if you demystify the world for young people. So we start off not with personal finance, we start off with corporate finance. So our program focuses on corporate financial literacy. So young people are learning about valuation and what a balance sheet is and what an asset is and what a liability is. And then we come and backfill the personal finance because they stay with us year round after we begin their process of learning. So let me just take 30 seconds and talk about what the model looks like. We literally teach young people how to buy and sell a company. And what we learned in doing that, to buy a company, you need an attorney, you need an accountant, you need an investment banker, you need marketing, you need HR, you need technology. They learn every aspect of what it takes to buy a company. So it's a very rigorous curriculum. And after they get exposed, it turns the light bulb on. Something starts to happen inside those young people where they have this yearning for more information. Then we begin to back up and talk about, well, here's how you create generational wealth for your family. Here's how you have to manage your credit so that you can do well in life. And so it's a lot easier for us with our model as we begin to get them interested first in the world and the opportunities that they have, to show them, here's how you can become successful. I think in many ways, that's our approach to leveling the playing field, because what happens, you begin to level the playing field by giving these young people these unique experiences very early. They begin to see the world around them, and they begin to dream differently about the potential for their own futures as they work with an investment banker. Many of them never even knew what an investment banker did. They work with these accountants, these transaction accountants. They work with the legal. They know the legal from the criminal side, but they don't know the legal from the corporate, lawyers and the due diligence they have to do. So the more you start to help them understand, here's the world you're going to live in, it really does teach them to dream differently about, the potential for their own futures. And they, in this process, are refining their skill set so that they can become very competitive in the world. And I think that helps to truly level the playing field. Let me, if you wouldn't, let me talk to a couple of the folks that are on this line. And the reason that I did this in this way, for the sake of those that were joining us, is I thought it was important that people saw various aspects of the program. So let me first of all just ask Alvin Wade, who was part of our initial student. He was the first student that ever went to Wall Street that came through our program. But also what Alvin does now, he manages and runs the program, very familiar with the impact and how it actually, affects students that get into the program, having maybe limited knowledge of business and finance. He was one that had a desire for business and finance. Every student doesn't that comes to our program, but I think it exposed him uniquely. Here are our outcomes from last year, and he's very intimately involved in the day-to-day operations of the program at this point. Alvin, if you would speak to how the program impacts and prepares students uniquely, how you would prepare for Wall Street, but also why you think the program makes such a difference in the lives of young people.
Yeah, perfect. And thanks for the introduction, Mr. Kirk. I think two things, right? So information has changed. Mr. Kirk, you taught us 20 years ago when you needed a business book to learn half of these things. You wanted to know something, you got to go to a library and look it up, right? Students have these tools at their disposal where you can learn anything you want, right? I mean, you can do that. But the thing that's missing, the thing that you've been so masterful for, and the thing that Youth About Business helped me with was that motivation, that introduction, right? I didn't know anyone on Wall Street. I didn't know anyone who pulled me to the side and say that this is a future career that I can have. And Youth About Business did that. And they did that in a way that was friendly to a high school student that met me where I was and said, hey, you can be somebody, you can learn, you can take those next steps. What I think about today is the fact that there's the whole network, right? So there's 9,000 people out there that have gone through those same steps, and I'm happy to say the alums that came after me are more connected, are smarter. They're way smarter than we were. We were trying to figure it out. They're like, Alvin made those mistakes and I'm going to not do that. So now they're starting businesses, they're funding venture capital, they're running schools, they're giving back, right? And I think that special environment, it makes the whole difference. We talk about equity, right? Equity is me believing in myself, my ability to go do that, even though no one that looks like me may have done that before, right? And so I think now the tools that Youth About Business has given us 20 years later is still giving back. So just to look at the outcomes, I mean, virtual has been a very hard transition. And I'm sure you guys can see the page, someone walked through it. Our students enjoyed themselves, right? 4.9, we challenge them, we're gonna push you. I know a lot of schools have kind of faltered, but Youth About Business has a culture that says, I believe in you, and even if I gotta do this virtually, we're still gonna deliver an impactful program, right? We let students work with executives from over 18 states. They work with teams along with one another. They still were able to prepare themselves for a future regardless of what the pandemic or the outcomes threw at us, right? You look at before and after instructions, right? Business economy, we talked about decentralization, cryptocurrencies, finance. They're hearing that from the source. They're talking to CEOs, which is great. Summer business camp, learning about metrics like EBITDA and things that'll really help you stand out in interviews and college conversations. again, they're delivering, they're showing mastery in that. So you look at those exit diagnostics, just proud of what the students could accomplish there. So again, at a high level, last year, again, we brought in about 450 students, 17 states, 4 countries, 50 high schools, and plenty of virtual training. So I think we're still delivering on that value add. But at the core for me as an alum, as someone who got tapped on the shoulder as a 14-year-old in Nashville and was taken to New York City and brought to the floor of the New York Stock Exchange and really given the tools to be able to figure out how do I navigate this path, and given the love of an organization that kept me straight, that's what made the big difference. And I'm so excited about what we're continuing to do across the country. And I'm just really with the tools and the resource, the technology and the alumni, man, the sky is the limit. So if we can continue to believe in these young people, give them opportunities, and make sure we surround them in the right environment, they can do anything. So that's my time. Happy to take any questions once we wrap up here.
I think the preparedness piece is critical, and making sure that young people, get uniquely prepared, because if they're going to be able to compete in America, we have to refine their skill sets. This is a different world than 20 years ago when Alvin started. We didn't have Google back then, and so now everything is done on a technology platform. One of the things that you mentioned, Mr. Rayner, when you first introduced is we now have a direct relationship with Bloomberg. Bloomberg provides every one of our students with this, with their Bloomberg terminal. So they have the top research tool in the country. And again, these are many times underserved students who have not heard anything about a Bloomberg terminal, but it's giving them those opportunities while they're very young. So that's important. When we first expanded from Nashville to a national model, Robyn was very instrumental in that. And the one thing I'd like for Robyn to share in her comments is the importance of, as a differentiator, how Youth About Business, because again, Robyn was funding at the largest bank in the world. She looked at Youth About Business, created a relationship with us, but she has told me many times that there's something unique and as a differentiator in this program. And so I thought it would definitely be interesting to hear her perspective on that.
Sam, happy to be here. Yes, I remember when I saw the students from Youth About Business nearly 20 years ago, what really differentiated that program from the programs that I participated in as a high school and college student and funded was that the students understood the terminology that the investment bankers were discussing as they discussed the M&A deal they did with Yellow Freight. They were able to really engage with those executives. And so if you imagine in the sleepy point of the summer, you had a 14-year-old student standing from amongst a group of about 100 high school students and asking an investment banker about how they did the valuation of the transaction. It blew the investment banker away. And for me, it answered the question that I had, which is, how do you empower young people to be able to navigate corporate spaces with understanding so that when they come in for internships, when they come in for corporate visits, it isn't just a visit like you're going through a field trip, but it really is something where they're engaging in understanding and are able to be better in understanding the applicability of what they're learning in high school to their future, and be able to be better interns if they get internships. And over the 20 years, I have seen that. I've witnessed it, is why I volunteered with Youth About Business. I funded Youth About Business and, had the ability to lead some of the work. And to this day, I'm still sending participants. It's been a long time since I've been at that investment bank, but I still recruit and place participants in this program because I know the impact that it can have. And to a person, it's a huge impact. But for me, it just answers the question about how to really prepare people contextually for the workplace. And I've seen it over and over again, and it is very, very different from programs I participated in and was thankful for as a high school student. I did junior achievement, I did inroads, I'm a lead alum. I volunteered with and funded Sponsors for Educational Opportunity, SEO program. This is different because the students have contextual understanding. They have been able to learn and apply concepts in a simulated real world environment, working with people who actually work in the sector. And that's before they even get into the internship program. So they come in with, I think, more confidence, more executive functioning skills and the ability to really hit the ground running because they know the concepts that they're dealing with. And in some cases, they've already developed somewhat of a relationship with the leaders, the managing directors that they're working with.
So, and Robyn, we can't thank you enough for opening that first opportunity to expand the program to New York. And from there on, part of that initial, opportunity helped us to grow to be a national program. And Dwayne, I know that Mr. Rayner did want to ask you, I remember when you came, you were working on Wall Street and you came to Vanderbilt University. And I'll never forget your statement when you came. You remember what you told me when you came to see the students doing the actual experiential model?
I think so. That's why I was smiling as Robyn was speaking, because, and I wasn't interjecting here, but I was just thinking about, I was working in M&A, mergers and acquisitions at JP Morgan. I was a senior associate at the time. And then I came to Nashville and I saw these students using the same language, using the same modeling, using the same approach that I just spent all weekend working on with a bunch of analysts, right? And I was like, what? You're doing this in high school? I couldn't believe it. So that was just an eye opener for me to see them able to grasp that to that level, and then be able to engage and discuss it as if they had been doing it, as a career. So that was really,
And it was really interesting. We did have an external assessment by Booz Allen Hamilton, and Booz Allen, when they first met with us, the first thing they said is, we don't know if you can teach high school students at this level. And when they finished their assessment, they said, we were blown away. All your stakeholders, our stakeholder interviews, the outcomes, and the students' true grasp of the knowledge and the information of the subject matter amazed us. And I think if you create an environment that you allow young people to truly, truly experience the kind of opportunity that you can give them, there's no limit to what these young people from underserved communities can accomplish. So often we overlook those communities. That's the other thing Booz Allen told us. So often that community of people are overlooked. They don't look to that community for talent, but we're very, very proud of the fact that it gives them a chance. It's rigorous, it's tough, it's not easy, but it does give them a chance to see and demystify the world of business. Kevin Grady is one of the current corporate partners who actually takes students and gives them internships. And he's talked a lot about how they came in prepared. And so I thought it would be really interesting for Kevin to just share with this group, briefly how he saw the preparedness when they came to work there at a multi-billion-dollar corporation last year that he's a part of.
Thank you, Sam. Good afternoon, everybody. One of the things that happens, particularly in our industry, I work in the insurance and risk management industry, one of the biggest industries in the world, and it's 80% white. And so when we start to look at the opportunities that we have with Youth About Business as a corporate partner, I'll call them a partner and not a sponsor. Our relationship goes way beyond just supporting the organization financially, but they are partners and one that's really critical to our success. When I think about the fact that the 81% of our organization is white and our average age is 48, we have a significant lack of racial diversity as well as younger folks that would be part of our succession planning. And so we're very engaged with YAB. The work that we're doing with YAB not only is rewarding as volunteers, but we're also giving these young people a lot of insights and information and education and training on our business and our industry. And so when we think about the talent pipeline, we think about them already being prepared. And there's a big difference between just getting the people in the door and getting really qualified, prepared, critical talent in the door, the kind of talent that will help us move our top and bottom line. And so getting to these young folks very early is no different than what the sports world does when they go out and start recruiting people at an early age. And so planting that seed early is going to put us in a tremendous position to start recruiting people that are prepared, that are aware and have insights on what we do and what our industry does.
It was really interesting because Kevin's company was one of the first companies in the history of Youth About Business to begin offering high school internships. There was a little bit of nervousness at the beginning of that thought. And I kept telling him, I said, they will come to your company prepared. They'll come with understanding professional schedules, and they'll come understanding communication skills at a very high level and how to engage. And it's interesting that the company has given us pretty strong feedback of how well received the students were and how receptive they are to continuing that process of engaging high school students. We have many internship programs for the college student level, but Kevin's corporation became one of the first ones to take the high school students. And I thought that was great. Guys, we're going to circle back around and get a couple other questions, but let me do this. There's 3 actual students on the phone. And I think that I'd love for you to hear their quick perspectives, if you don't mind. Holland is getting ready to graduate and go off to the career world. Holland started in the program as a young man in high school. He certainly is one that has been exemplary in terms of a Youth About Business student and alum. He is currently leading an initiative with a company where they're actually working on a technology solution for a company while they're in college. Holland, real briefly, what is it that Youth About Business has impacted you? How do you feel it's prepared you as you get ready to go off into the corporate world?
Thank you for that introduction, Mr. Kirk. And I'd like to say hello to everyone in the Zoom, but definitely just a lot of things that have been spoken on have been resonating a lot within me as far as just what the impact of Youth About Business has been on me and the counterparts that I've been able to stay along with throughout this process. So people that I was able to meet at Youth About Business, not just becoming lifelong friends, but becoming these individuals that I'm going to end up building the networks with. And as I look to start my own entrepreneurial advantages in my community, people I look to hire as my CFO, as my CEO, as my CMO. So this has been able to change the paradigm that individuals are going through high school, going through college, thinking about how they want to go into the career. This changed the paradigm about how I think about moving forward, as far as just not looking to go land a position and work in corporate for 40 to 50 years, but to grab the skills and get the knowledge and understand the skill set that I need to be able to lead and build the bridge for those that come behind me and create the right network and the right soil to plant the seed to be able to reap the best advantages. So I definitely say that Youth About Business has been integral and a life-changing moment in my life, because before I went to Youth About Business, Mr. Kirk knows this, I wasn't interested in business. I didn't think about it. My mom actually had to pull my ear and let me go to camp. So being able to change the way I thought about it, change what my actual passions were, and being able to monetize those is what Youth About Business has been able to do for me.
Yeah, he said his mom had to nudge him. No, she literally said, "You're going." Holland was not committed to coming to the business camp because business camp doesn't sound fun. It sounds like this sort of boring. And you heard Alvin mention it earlier. One of the things we figured out how to do is we're pretty masterful at keeping it light, making it fun, keeping it engaging. And so high school students really do enjoy it once they get there. But Holland's mom and Holland has told me, she literally had to nudge him very strongly that you're going to do this program. And after he did the first year, he's been connected ever since, all the way through college. He's even served as a college intern with Youth About Business, and very proud of where he is and where he's headed. We'll end with Nigel. Talk about the exposure that Youth About Business gave you your very first year being a part of a program like this, and how you felt it was impactful.
Coming into Youth About Business, I was a new student, and the summer going into my 9th grade year, and just how Mr. Kirk and Mr. Wade and Mr. Rayner and Holland were talking about, it was really just a transformational experience, because as a kid, everybody asks you, what do you want to be, and the standard response is, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be an astronaut, and you're never really thrown into those positions where you're able to learn about them in real time. And with Youth About Business, they give you the opportunity to learn about a certain, field in real time. You meet with people who work in that field. You go through, a mock, you learn how to buy and sell a company. And it was, really just fun and interesting. And then even, Mr. Kirk talked about the high school internships and getting to, intern at Apple, which just hit, a $3 trillion market cap last week. That's something that most high schoolers, they don't have the opportunity to do. And it was, it's just a blessing.
Yeah, that's very good. So that's kind of the overview of who Youth About Business is. I hope that there are some questions and some thoughts here that maybe people may want to ask, but I'll turn it back over to you and hope we've done a pretty good job. Obviously, we could talk about this program for a long time because we've been doing it for 29 years. Feel very strongly about, the opportunity we've tried to create. And to the point of this topic, leveling the playing field, what I have learned is if you give young people the right skill sets, they can compete with I don't care what background they come from, they can compete and work their way toward participating in the American dream like any other group of young people.
Sam, it's inspiring. I'm listening to this, even though I've been involved for 20 some years. Every time I hear the students talk, it makes me wish I could go back to high school, especially now, the program's evolved. One of the things I wanted to ask, and this may be for the students, because, as you know, I was with the program, I do the advanced camp and curriculum development and so forth. But one of the things I've noticed, and this is a very pertinent skill set in life as well, but I just wanted to hear how that has affected them at such an early age. It's a very competitive environment. It's a very team-oriented environment. I heard Nigel speaking about how, or maybe it was Holland, who was speaking about, bringing people together. If he's going to be running a company, he's going to have to pull a CEO, a CFO, all these people together. Just the process of working in teams, as in a difficult kind of a case environment, very competitive. I will say this: they stay up all night, they negotiate, they do all these things, and we can't get into all that, but just for the viewers to get a feel, what is the biggest kind of learning experience for that, and how has that helped them? I'm going to ask that question, then I'm just going to jump to another question. Just the career path, right? I know, for example, I was doing the camp when Alvin was a student, and I know a lot of these students have gone on to do work on Wall Street and so forth. And just could you shed some light on some of the highlights of those career paths that people have gone on as well? Because this is obviously unique, and it's something that has had an impact. I just wanted to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, let me do this. Let me just make a comment about your first question, and then I will ask maybe Holland to address that in terms of what the impact is of working in teams. But one of the things we purposefully did was to ensure that our teams were diverse. And so when we put a team together, these young people started as high school rising sophomores. Nigel snuck in early. I tease him about that to this day. He got in as a rising high school ninth grader, which is he's been able to handle it. But normally our program starts, they're rising sophomores in high school. But on the team, there'll be teams of 5 to 7 team members. We try to make sure there's gender diversity, there's racial diversity, there's age diversity, so that there'll be like a high school senior will be working with this high school sophomore. And we try to make sure that the diversity of thought is a part of our process, just teaching them the importance very early on of the ability to accept diverse thought. And that's also very important when you deal with this issue of diversity, because everyone doesn't think about it the same way. But and then I'll come back and answer your question about career paths. But Holland, you want to take that one on why working in teams and diverse teams, how that was something that very early on gave you some great education.
And Holland, one of the challenges of it, but that's real life as well. And I've seen the challenges. I've watched you guys. So.
For sure. No, there are definitely multiple challenges that you are able to face as far as going through the camp and being able to understand why working in teams is so important. But as Youth About Business instilled in us, it's so important to be able to eat these challenges for breakfast, as they always say. But along with just going through the challenges and seeing it through, it teaches you perseverance, but it also teaches you how to strategically take a problem and say, okay, 5 people with the exact same skill set are going to look at this problem the exact same way. They're not going to address the biases that they might be addressing because they all think about it in the same way. But if you have different individuals from different backgrounds, different age levels, different focuses and perspectives, different career paths, they're going to be able to address each other's biases and also present different skills to the team. So understanding as a leader, if you're the CEO, CMO, understanding as a leader what skills each individual possesses, what part of the project that you have to be able to flesh out, it allows you to be more efficient, more effective, and to address all the biases that you might not be understanding in real time. So I hope that was able to answer the question.
Yeah. And the other thing, Rayner, we deal with students at the C-suite level. So that's something that's unique as well. So we're teaching students how the CEO would approach this, or how the CFO would approach this, or the chief marketing officer, or the chief human resource officer. So that differentiator also is an education process for us as well, because very few times are they given the option to be able to think about a problem from that perspective of a company. So it really does give them a chance. And we've had some fallout sometimes. The CEOs having a hard time motivating people. And I tell them that's real life. Sometimes that's very, very important. that you deal with that. And then Alvin keeps up with a lot of the alum. And Alvin, why don't you just take a broad swath at the folks who you've seen, come after you, because they're everywhere. I mean, there's been a tremendous amount of career success and outcomes that have happened as a result of the engagement in Youth About Business. And Alvin can cover some of these very, very successful young people that are out there now.
Yep. We had a slide, so I don't have that visual, but I'll talk to it. I think the misnomer is that you have to go into business, right? And so I think the thing that we always talk about is skill set. What skills do I want to have, right? So one example of that, Carrie Connor, right? Carrie said, I'm working at Kimberly-Clark, great company, but this is not for me. I want to go to Hollywood, right? So everyone knows you go to Hollywood, you got to network, you got to be tenacious, you're going to get a million no's. She was in, next to Chadwick Boseman, at the Black Panther cast. She had a show on CNBC. I know Carrie, I know who she is. She made that happen for herself, right? We've got a young lady who was on TV, right? She started an Instagram show. We've got folks in VC, right? Slim and Huskies, EJ almost didn't make it to New York because his teacher didn't want him to come. And that helped transform the way he thought about his network. And so he's out building a national pizza chain out there, right? And again, of course, you've got people like Kain, who's working in private equity, Aaron Porter, who used to stay over my house as a close family friend, who's running commercial real estate in Nashville, one of the hottest markets out there, right? And so I think the conversation shifts from all these things that we can be to all these people who are doing cool stuff. And again, the network is mostly under 40, right? You could create a master under 40 list, because if I'm one of the older alum, I got a few years left before I hit that milestone. And so I'm still able to see what they're doing without even really, you think about business, you can play this game till you're 70, 80, 90, right? And so they still got a lot of real estate to grow. So just excited about what they're doing in all these different places, but at the core, still using that skill set that they learned, that confidence they were able to develop at a very young age. And I can't stress enough, again, like those who are interested in business and finance, all over Wall Street, all over tech, Silicon Valley. We even had a young kid, he loved the markets. Trevor Gormley was on CNBC, I wouldn't say regularly, but on 3 occasions, right? So again, it's just exciting to see people plant those seeds at a young age, get developed in Youth About Business, and go materialize that as young adults.
Great. Well, let me say this too. I want to ask this, and while you're still on the screen, Alvin, and Sam, you can speak to this. We know, or at least we advertise that Youth About Business works with youth from age 12. And I know the year-round leadership program that you have is been the meat of the program for so long in terms of what it provides as far as training for students. And the actual engagement day-to-day of running a business. And Sam, you can speak to this right now if you want to. I know you do business transactions all the time. You're involved in a huge development project. Can you just describe the experience that the students are gaining at that age, 12, 13, 14 years old, working alongside the decision makers in the business, doing transactions, watching the process grow and so forth?
And we transition from the theoretical, because the M&A simulation is that, it's a simulation. We'll take, who were 2 of the companies last year, Alvin? Who bought who last year?
Well, it's exciting. We did Yum Brands and Beyond Meat. And I think KFC.
Okay, so Yum Brands buys Beyond Meat. So we do that kind of stuff. That's a simulated model. But moving it from the theoretical to the practical is a very impactful part of the training. So Nigel is on the phone now. Nigel, during the school year, is actually going through the real estate development you just mentioned. So Nigel got a chance to see how was the packet, the credit facility put together to actually be able to fund the development. And Nigel will tell you, we went back and forth. I don't know if he remembers all of it because they are young, but there was a key part of a tenant. Nigel, do you remember how that structure actually got it over over the line to actually get the funding in place?
Yeah, I remember, we were having difficulties with getting, funding because, the area that we were investing in, as you said, was an underserved community. And they had never had a mixed use property in that community before. So it was, difficult trying to get the bank to lend because it was kind of an unprecedented way. And then, just beyond seeing how funding works behind a real estate project, meeting and, seeing the construction plans, talking with engineers, talking even today, the meeting that we just had where we learned that, the thing that takes the longest a lot of times is just putting down the foundation, just pouring the concrete and laying out And then, you know, before that, we learned about how to get all these permits and how we had to get a water drainage permit and then another permit from the city and all the different processes that you don't learn until you're actually doing it. You know, we're learning as high schoolers, you know.
Yeah. And go ahead, Ryan.
What grade are you in, Nigel? I just want to make sure we heard that right.
I'm in 11th grade in high school.
Okay, you were doing this in 5th grade and so forth. Okay.
Yeah, he snuck in early, but again, so normally, but one of the things that solidified the funding was we finally got a lease, a 10-year lease with a healthcare center. So when the bank saw, okay, you've got 10 years of lease revenue and income coming, they were able to help, but they got a chance to literally see that. Very seldom do high school students get exposed to that, but they start with the theoretical where Alvin is there running, helping them get, you know, the understanding of business in a general way, but then they transition over into these real live actual businesses. And that's a really unique opportunity for, again, students that come from these communities. You know, and I want to circle back to Robyn though, Rayner, before you ask another question, because Robyn made a comment to me one time that I'll never forget. Years back, Robyn, when you were with Deutsche Bank, but you remember when we first started, the whole goal was to take a student, get them introduced to this world of corporate finance, but ultimately they end up coming to, you know, these careers. Deutsche Bank, Jim Deneau, the first person that was hired after Alvin went to Barclays, Aaron Porter, and then Chelsea, and then Gaston, and then Amin. There became this little pipeline of young men and women coming. And I always remember you talking about that's exactly what we wanted to model. You want to talk a little bit about that for us, please?
Yeah, I think that was a real differentiator for the bank. You know, funding these internship pipeline programs in partnership with key colleges and universities and other sort of typical pipeline programs that exist on the street. What typically would happen when the young people got to the firm is that they would struggle with just things that are part of a corporate climate, showing up on time, networking, being able to meet and manage up to your boss, being able to really finish a transaction in a particular set of time that really helped the bottom line of the firm. All of those were things that I think each of those young people could have done, but they would have needed a much more wider time horizon to be able to learn the climate, learn the culture, learn the expectations and the networks, and then execute. The thing about Youth About Business is the students all had that in advance. They were able to hit the ground running. I remember even just speaking about Chelsea and how effective she was in her internship. And it was because she had done a number of these transactions during her time in Youth About Business as a student. And then as an intern, she had to turn around and teach the concepts to the students who were in the program behind her, sort of like what Alvin talked about. So what we know is if you learn things in a real world environment, you learn it better. But then if you have to teach what you learn, you get deeper understanding. And then if you're going into a corporate setting where you're already networked with the likes of Jim Deneau, because he volunteered in the camp when you were 14 years old, then you've gotten a leg up on a lot of these other interns that come in that don't have the networks, don't have the experience, and have never, been exposed to valuation and EBITDA and M&A talk.
Yep.
And that's language that I have as an English major. I didn't know any of this either. So.
and so thanks, Robyn. I truly appreciate the values that you mentioned, the Baha'i values and spiritual values that they espouse, in terms of oneness, in terms of, acceptance of humanity and humanity working together to solve problems. One of the things we've always instituted is the right kind of values. We've even had sessions on ethics and morals, because as you begin to earn more money, what kind of ethical decisions are you going to make? Does it truly then become a greed factor? Are you all still looking for the greater good that you can do? So I think that there's ways that we have tried, and I'm a pastor, as you mentioned, but there are ways we have tried to ensure that the young people get a full breadth of exposure, not only from becoming strong business leaders, but also making sure that they make wise, just moral and ethical decisions in their lives as they get older.
Good, good. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you brought that up. We're going to transition into a Q&A. Before we do, I just want you, if you could take a minute, because there's one area that I don't know if you had a chance to speak to, and that's the progression of the camp itself. You know, my experience with them has been always amazing to see how when you put students together and give them a problem, how they can come up with a solution. And they always astound us in terms of their capacity. Some of the challenges that you presented before them over the years, and not the basic camp, but the advanced camp, which means students
Right.
are coming back and continuing this learning, continuing their engagement at different levels of understanding. One was, I think, had something to do with the electric vehicle and the range anxiety. They flew out to Apple to talk about, you know, using technology to solve a problem with obesity. And if you just speak to that trend, that continued progression of learning and some of the impact it's had, and then we'll go into our Q&A.
Yep. One of the things is, let's start properly then. 10 to 14, that's all entrepreneurial training. So before they actually get to the business camp, there is an entrepreneurial training program where we still match these young people with business owners. It's a great community opportunity for existing business owners to give back to the next generation. As they move beyond that, then they come into the business camp where they actually learn how to buy and sell a company. What we found is after you teach them that first level, they're hungry for more knowledge. They're thirsting. I always ask them every year, do you guys want it harder or easier next year? It's pretty rigorous the first year trying to do an M&A simulation in a week. And they always say, make it more challenging. So every year we'll move from the M&A simulation to an operations, maybe more strategy type program at the advanced level. So we've done a little bit of everything and we try to stay topical. And so maybe when we come back, we should have Kevin address that as well, because we did risk management this year. We were very unfamiliar with risk management, but that area of training was fascinating. I'm telling you. And the young people, I asked them, how many of you have even heard of risk management before the camp? None of them had ever heard of it. But I don't know if you remember Alvin's slide, but they went from a competency of 7 in the pre-test. I think it was 81 or 90. I think it was 81 in the post-test on the competency slide. So there are lots and lots of ways that we continue to raise the level of training so that every year they walk away with an increased knowledge base. So by the time they get to college, they walk into college very well prepared. Kevin could probably speak a little bit to why that risk management case just blew he and his firm away, because it's the first time we ever did anything like that.
When you think about how our industry is changing, more people are working from home, and when you think about cybersecurity, which is a risk management issue, it's just one of the issues of the day. Global warming, another issue of the day, when you start to see some of these unusual weather occurrences that are taking place. So it was just unbelievable for us who sit in this industry to be able to impart some of that knowledge on these young people, but incredibly timely and relevant information for some of the things that are going on and some of the things that we wrestle with every day. So getting their input and insights was just fascinating.
Well, this has been great. We have tons of questions for you all, so I wanted to get to those. And I want to thank all the students and the panelists, Robyn and Kevin, all you guys. This has been great. I think this has been such an informative session. I'm going to start off with an interesting one from the beginning. A person says, "This has been an inspiring and it sounds like an amazing educational experience and a tried and true program that is expanding. My question is, do you have a program for adults?" Specifically the parents of the youth and children. So many of us have had little to no financial education, and it would be so helpful to learn more so that we can better support our children.
That's it. Dwayne, we get asked that question quite a bit, to be honest. So we actually, as humorous as it is, we actually have a program structure that we started called Adults About Business. We have not fully rolled it out, but we began the structure for it for that very purpose, because many of the parents were saying, my children are coming home, they're learning about stocks, bonds, all these interesting business concepts, and we aren't learning it. And so we do have, it's not fully, it hadn't been fully put in place, but we do have the structure for an Adults About Business training program. And what it would be obviously is not the same rigor,
right,
but it would have the same sort of access to the same information. where they would meet with attorneys and accountants and bankers to try to help them gain understanding. That's a really good question.
Well, there's obviously a market for it. You get asked it quite a bit.
We get to ask that question quite a bit. Alvin, you want to talk about the year-round training? Because I think one of the things that happens is people look at us and we talk so much about our flagship program of the summer business camp, but this is literally a year-round training program. And we cover a lot of things in that entrepreneurial vein there. Alvin, you want to speak to that?
Sure, I think, and again, the summer intensive is about engagement, right? So it's hard to talk to someone about value if they haven't even been introduced to the notion of a stock, right? Everyone wants to skip the stocks. No one wants to talk about the fact that companies are the thing that folks are investing in. It's a tool that people use to kind of support whatever their mission is and grow that. So throughout the year, we get together once a month, and there was another question about time commitment. We don't want it to take over school. I think school plays an important role in students' lives, but we do get together for about 2.5 hours for most of the students, or 2 hours a month. And we'll talk about a topic from the summer, right? So maybe we'll take stocks and take a step back and say, what are some of the careers associated with that? What are the reasons they exist? And again, how would an entrepreneur use those skills? So again, being an entrepreneur, you almost have to do every job, right? I got to play finance, I got to play marketing, I got to play accounting. And so we take those months, that once a month meeting, to peel out one of those pieces of the process, be it marketing, accounting, and just talk about at the core again, like what that means. What are the skill sets required to do it? How do I get good at it? What are some of the companies that are best in class? And what are maybe some jobs that associate with that? And we give students exercise. And Mr. Kirk talked that, again, there are additional opportunities for some students in that leadership team, right? So maybe you're working on real projects that are live, and you get to work on some of those other skills like patience, right? Real estate's going to take you 2-3 years to get things done. So that's kind of how we infuse that back into the curriculum. I know we talk a lot about risk management. That's how we kind of shock the system so it's fun and it's challenging, but we do take a step back so students are able to digest over longer periods of time exactly what those skills are to be successful in those different areas. Again, entrepreneurship being all of them, but some jobs being in one of those singular areas.
Thank you, Alvin. How does a young person qualify for this program? How are they recruited? How much does it cost? How much of a weekly time commitment do you suggest? How long does it last? These are all from one series, so I just wanted to share with you at the same time.
Wow. We have not tried to become an after-school program because there's so many of those out there. We want our program to remain highly impactful. I think, but this is a great question for Robyn, because I remember you even hear her today. She said it, I still refer students to Youth About Business. So Robyn, why don't you talk about the qualifications that we've always tried to have, which are very minimal? Because I mean, you were very specific about that in terms of we don't cream. And then also why we've been very thoughtful about not trying to take the place of school. Our students are so programmed heavily. We want to carve out our space for students to be a part of a program like this. So Robyn.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's another differentiator, is that the program does not cream for the high achieving students. There is no request for a certain GPA or a certain SAT, ACT, or state test score. Students are really sought after for their level of motivation and interest in participating, which is demonstrated by, a short essay and, are you showing up for the information session? It's phenomenal. And again, it's a differentiator. I have recruited from programs like this. I have recruited people into college from programs like this. I've recruited people into corporate positions, and have also funded many of these programs. And the thing that I think is the missing ingredient of many of these programs is that they cream the students. So you're not getting your top innovators, you're not getting your top creative talent. And as we know, with the innovators that have existed over history in this country, they're often the people who aren't the ones necessarily getting the best grades in school or necessarily showing up in a particular prescribed way in school. Those are the innovators, and those are the people that make a difference for folks like, people like Kevin Grady, who's working in his company, and need to get people who are going to come in, be innovative thinkers, and perform at high levels. So that's the thing, I think, again, is one of the secret ingredients of success for Youth About Business. It does not cream the students. It looks for students who are demonstrating motivation by the way they show up and by a short statement that they make, and then exposes them to high-level thinking in high-quality situations, working with people who are working in the sectors that they're interested in. The last thing I want to say is whether or not a student goes into business or is interested in business isn't really the motivator behind this either. It's to get young people engaged in understanding business, which fuels this entire country, and being able to navigate that either as an employee or as just a very engaged citizen who's focused on building wealth creation for themselves and their future communities.
Yeah, yeah. So we've been very purposeful, even as we work with school systems. And I mean, we do have certain school, like some of the charter schools that work directly with us. We've been very purposeful in select your marginal student. Don't just take your A student, find that student, because there's a lot of great, I mean, I've got all kind of anecdotal stories over the years of a D student getting ready to drop out of school. They come to Youth About Business and something turns on for that kid. That student is engaged uniquely. They're the one leading the negotiation, whereas in class, they sit back and they don't say anything. You just don't know what the gift is in our children. And sometimes the way education is delivered in a lecture format to young people, it's just gonna not be motivating to them. So we're very careful about, so I guess the answer to that question is we accept all students who apply. Now, what happens for them to get to the other levels of the program, like if they're going to go to the business camp, we watch to see how well they do in the business economy. And I think we probably need to cover that. So all students enter through the business economy of America. There'll be thousands of students in that part of the program this year. That program starts in June, and it gives them a chance to I take that back. Some of those students will actually start in February on a once-a-month session that Alvin talked about. As they begin to enroll, we'll start them once a month now, just starting to get some introduction. In June, they'll get an immersive experience and a 3-day, 4-day online experience. But then after that, some of them will actually get a chance to come to the business camp and see how to buy a company. So, but now we do look to see how they perform. If this motivation that Robyn talked about really drives them to want to excel and achieve, then we will take some of those students. And other students will put on our career path. So they have 2 different tracks that they'll enter in once they come into the program. But we tried very hard not to label a student before we give them a chance to see how well they can do.
That's a huge differentiator, like you said. And this kind of goes to the next question, which you kind of touched on, but it says, can you share how you track the growth of younger program participants, younger students through their development from year to year? So what are your metrics of tracking their progress, their development? I know you have that assessment test. I'm sure you could ask.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So we do a pre and post test, and then we have these touch points of experiences throughout the time they're in the program. Like Alvin, when was Nigel? Who did you meet with your first year in the program when you went to Apple? Because it was in your second year you went to Apple. Who was your direct report at Apple?
My direct report was Meredith.
And then who requested that you come back to Apple for a second year?
Kevin, correct.
So Kevin is the senior finance officer at Apple. So Dwayne, to answer that question, we keep every one of those touch points in the database of the students' engagement. And that's why you think about a 15-year-old goes to Apple for the first time, they work with Meredith. The direct report above Meredith says, we want him back another year. So all that's a part of his profile that's being developed within our database at Youth About Business. Holland, would you talk about the Bloomberg certification? Why is that an impactful part of helping your maturation process of becoming the business person you want to become?
Sure. No, just going through any of the certification process, specifically the Bloomberg one, it's a really rigorous course that you actually go through on your own time. So you're able to go back and go forward and actually learn the industry standard of how these individuals in investment banking or any other corporate structures that utilize this Bloomberg material. It uniquely prepares you, one, and it also gives you a diversification. So as I send my resume, as I connect with CEOs and other individuals on LinkedIn, they already see that I'm beginning to prepare myself to be in this uniform, in this place that they're hiring their individuals. So it definitely sets you apart, and it puts you in really great graces when you're interviewing or talking to other individuals.
Nigel, are you Bloomberg certified?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and when did you get Bloomberg certified?
I think my freshman year of high school.
Okay, so Dwayne, to answer we track every bit of that data in the student profile so that we can continue to see how we're continuing. So in some ways it's challenging to us because I know Alvin just sent me a note advising this year we're going to have to deal with the global supply chain. You know, we're going to have to deal, he's starting because we're having to continue to stretch our own envelope to keep the student training sort of at that very high level.
Yes, he says, there is more to changing outcomes than getting people in. Jeff Howard found out the top minority students admitted into Harvard Business School needed continued support at each level, undergraduate, graduate, and early career. That's so true. Could you talk about how your program builds networks at any of these levels?
So I think that both Robyn and Alvin will address this question, but I will say this. Before the pandemic, one of the first points of exposure for us was taking, again, you got to keep in mind the demographic we're working with, and they would live on campus of either Emory, Columbia, or Vanderbilt. So even that initial exposure to, you know, a tier 1 university or an Ivy League at a very early age. I'll never forget Cain, who is now vice president of private equity, that he said he never even saw himself being at University of Chicago. His first experience was at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. So then by putting a rigorous curriculum with this sort of process of them getting exposed to a tier 1 university and then continuing to build out that curriculum to where it continually prepares them uniquely, I think is a very important thing. Robyn and Alvin, how else are we addressing that? Because I don't think our young people are taking a lot of the remedial because they show up a little bit differently prepared. They're not taking a lot of the additional support because they show up differently prepared. So Alvin and Robyn, you guys.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's not surprising that they need help because a lot of the times when people are coming into these MBA programs, they've gotten the book learning, but they haven't gotten the exposure to meaningful corporate internships. A lot of times with underserved students, they come into corporate internships and they are working on very low level opportunities, don't have the opportunity to network because there's not the window of time to do so in a meaningful way in a corporate environment. Relationships take time. With the Youth About Business students, someone like Nigel, when he goes into Apple Corporation as a college student, he's already been there. When he goes in as a college student, he's already going to have relationships with the CFO, right? It's going to put him head and shoulders above people who are coming in from his college internship programs. And then if he goes on to get an MBA, he's already networked in the way that we know makes a difference in the corporate environment. So the programs like Youth About Business make that difference. One anecdote I want to share is, I'll never remember when I was at the investment bank and I was walking past a conference room and looked through a window and saw a 14-year-old boy in a white collared shirt and a tie lecturing to the young people that I was hosting from Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, which is a low-income area, who were doing a visit. That 14-year-old boy who was presenting in his white collar shirt and tie was the son of a managing director on the sales and trading floor, who didn't have anything to do that day. So he thought it would be fun to put his son in front of that group of high school students from Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, who were sitting in the room in tank tops and shorts because they had not been prepared for their visit. We could count that as an investment bank as a good corporate citizenship outreach opportunity to expose Black children to investment banking. But we know for a fact if we put that young person in a tank top up against that young man in the white collar shirt with a tie, the young man with the white collar shirt and the tie is going to do vastly better. And he gets to that MBA program, he's going to know the context of the environment for which he's getting that MBA. That's the differentiator, and Youth About Business addresses that head on by taking on young people at the age of 14, meeting them where they are, exposing them to these concepts, and giving them pipelines into the networks and the internships that they need. With that, I'll turn this over to Alvin Wade, who I actually have known since he was 14 or 15 years old, right? So it's nearly 20 years. So if you also want to talk about networks, I count myself as part of his network, and I count him as part of my network, this young man who I met when he was in high school.
I'll just take 30 seconds. I think some of the challenges, so when you switch environments, you go from the smartest in whatever room you were in high school to not the smartest. That's for everybody, right? You go to college, you're surrounded by not the smart. And you get to the workforce, you're sitting next to I was sitting next to the valedictorian at BC. He was a true dork, right? Like, this guy is smarter than we ever know. So I think socialization is, people will leave these tier 1 colleges and go home to housing projects, and then leave that housing project and go to their internship on Wall Street. And I don't have first month, last month deposit. I don't have $8,000 to even start my job. I don't know what a junior spread collar is. I'm trying to fit in. I'm wearing like cufflinks. So that's socialization. Youth About Business will take a student, and they're having camp at Columbia University. They have an accounting meeting, and that meeting is going to be downtown at Ernst & Young, so that you don't have stalkers. Like, you're not shocked when you're trying to find the elevator, when you're looking at how people dress. Like, that socialization is preparing you. And so now, if you're a kid who doesn't have those resources, I'm confident, okay? Because I've done this before. And so even though there may not be other people that look like me, even though I'm not rich, I can sit in this room and know there's going to be some times where I have anxiety about if I'm smart enough, if I belong here, but I have a group that I can call out to. I've got homeboys I can reach out to. I've got a network that I can lean on because I've done this before and I'm confident. That's what generational change looks like. YB helps prepare you for that. Not only being prepared, you got to be prepared. You can't be an investment banker if you don't know EBITDA, but like also socially being tough enough to stand there. So that's all I'll say about that. And again, appreciate those comments.
Yeah. And Sergio Sotolongo, I'll never forget it, Goldman Sachs told me, we hired a bunch of Harvard folks. We made an extra effort to bring in a lot of African-American graduates from Harvard, but we couldn't retain them. And he said, why couldn't we retain them? I said, what Alvin just said, and Robyn both, if you don't socialize people to the culture, I don't care how smart they are, there's this, and so I think the lack of exposure and also building confidence. When Nigel finally walks into a room, I'll never forget, Mark Braithwaite told me how his buddies were so nervous going to interview. And he was saying, why are you nervous? I've been dealing with accountants and bankers since I was 15. So he's going to his interview, and his friends at St. John's were all nervous, and he didn't have the same nervousness. He had a level of confidence. Socializing young people to this culture is very important. That socialization we provide early builds their confidence, and then they learn the mechanics of what it takes to operate in those rooms. We're going to make sure of that part. We do have a 10 to 14-year-old program. If a community says we'd love to bring the whole Youth About Business program, then we would certainly make sure and work with that community on how to do that. And our 10 to 14-year-old program is established.
Is there a way to get the program into Canada? Is it in Canada? I know you have international students. Maybe you want to just speak to that.
Virtually now, we can work everywhere, right, Alvin? I mean, we had students from 4 different countries this year. So, I mean, and the way everything is remote at this point. And once we get beyond the pandemic or beyond the virtual, we would then begin to establish operations in those various markets.
Someone asked regarding the entrepreneurial training program, I would like to know one success story.
Just tell them Google Slim and Huskies.
Okay.
Slim and Huskies is probably one of the number one entrepreneurial stories growing in this country. 3 guys, the CEO of the company was a Youth About Business alum. He told me the first time I went to New York, you took us on the floor of the stock exchange. I started to see my world, that the world is this big place. He grew up in what they would call striving schools, or what they call them in Nashville, schools that are always struggling academically with performance. And this young man, so if you Google Slim and Husky and just look up Emmanuel Reed, he is the CEO of the company, it'll tell one of the most fascinating entrepreneurial stories happening in this country. And then if you want to look at a senior executive, Google Kimberly Massey. She just became the CMO at Lifeway. Little girl, single parent, was timid as could be when she first started at age 13 in this program. She just last year got an appointment as a CMO of Lifeway Christian Resources. So there's tremendous, yeah, there are lots of those stories, but those two would be great.
Okay, Swimming Husky and Kim Massey. Here's another question, and then we're going to try to wrap up. Okay, because I don't want to leave without addressing this. How do people join, and how much does it cost to join, or does it have a cost at all? You know, because these are from students. I think this is from a student who's asking this question.
So student, go to youthaboutbusiness.org. There's a big registration button right in the middle of the page. They can register right there and join. The initial part of the program, before all the other various opportunities that we talked about today, that initial part costs $99. So students can join, that's all online, that's all virtual, and it'll cost $99 to join that part of the program. They will begin, you know, Alvin and his team will begin to reach out and engage them in the monthly meetings. And then they will then be put in one of these two veins after they get through the initial training, either the business camp or the career preparation vein. So youthaboutbusiness.org. For us to bring a full-fledged program into a city, obviously there is a budget and everything around that. We'd have to have a follow-up discussion on that. The majority of our support comes from corporations, individuals that see this as the kind of investment they want there to make. We're willing to take donations now. You go to youthaboutbusiness.org, click on donate. It helps us underwrite the cost of this program. So anyone that's listening and says, hey, I'd like to support some of these young people, whether we're going to do it in Florida or wherever we're going to do it, youthaboutbusiness.org, there's a donate button at the top. We appreciate your donations because that's how we actually, you know, fund the program. We don't have any government funding. We're totally private individuals that have helped underwrite the cost of this program. It is an expensive program when it comes to students traveling to New York, students going to Wall Street. There's lots of pieces. So as we get back to this, it'll probably be what we call a hybrid program. There are additional costs that we'll then have to cover. Obviously, we've been able to save some of those costs with it being remote.
This has been fascinating. I'm sure I speak for everybody. The initial topic of leveling the playing field, I think the program and the contributors from the program have basically allowed the program to speak for itself, the outcomes and the wonderful conversations that we've had. I want to thank all of you for taking this time to come and learn about this program and the presenters as well.
The most important thing we want to do is teach young people to dream differently about the potential for their own futures, regardless of where their plight in life has landed them. That's what we want to stay committed to. Let's teach them to dream differently about the potential for their own futures. Thank you guys for having us.